Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Laurence Tini. Of course, I'm very sorry for not being with you. The aim of my course will be to provide the basis for the more specialized lectures you have. This is why it is called Fundamentals of Phase Transition. First, I would like to say that I am not a specialist of phase transition. I'm sure that a lot of people in the room know much more than me about phase transition. In fact, I'm a soft matter physicist, and I'm interested in transfers. And in some of these transfers, phase transitions may be involved. For instance, when you dry a polymer solution, you will have, in fact, two different phase transition, because first you have evaporation of the solvent, and also you can have a phase transition of the polymer. So this is the kind of topic I'm interested in. As a non-specialist, I will try to give you first fast, because I have two lectures. I will try to give you a fast overview, but also as simple as possible, phase transition as I understand them. So I don't see you, I don't see your faces, I don't know how you react. So please don't hesitate to interrupt me if what I'm saying is unclear. To ask questions during the lecture. We have made a test. In fact, I can hear when you speak from the audience. So please don't hesitate. And we will all go back to sleep, and it will be very boring. Okay, so this is the outline of my two lectures. I will start. Do you see the arrow of? Yes, okay. I will start by introducing the tools we will need, the thermodynamic potentials. And then we will talk about really basis, which is the phase diagram of a pure substance. And I will then introduce a theory which is able to describe the main features of phase transitions according to their nature. And then this probably will be, this will be in the second lecture. We'll go back, knowing all that, we will go back to the phase diagram of a pure substance, and then to more complex systems, binary mixture, and we will talk about its phase transition, but also its possible phase separation. And we will end by briefly talking about metastable behaviors, and in particular glass transition, which is a non-equilibrium, glassy state is a non-equilibrium state. Okay, so is there any question? No? Okay, thank you. Thank you for answering. Okay. So yes, before beginning, I would like to give a few references. So just for the basis, and this is also what I have used to prepare my lecture. So you can, of course, use a very classical textbook, French textbook. And I think that the clear I have read is that one, and it's a very old one, so it should be in all libraries. Sorry, it's in French, but I have not found an English-speaking reference. And online, I would like to recommend two references that I've used a lot, and I think that are very, very insightful. The first one is lectures on statistical mechanics by Matthew Schwartz. So it's about thermodynamics, but not only, it's wider than that. But you will see that the part on thermodynamics is really, really insightful. And okay, so I have used it a lot. And also, if you're interested in Landau theory, because I will say only a few words about Landau theory, you can read the lecture by Peter Umstead. And also, it's very It's very theoretical, but it's very clearly done. Okay. So let's start by introducing the tools we will need. So first we will need an energy, and we will work with the Gibbs energy. So the Gibbs energy is defined by the internal energy plus PV minus TS. And sorry, there is a D which should not be here. So this is minus TS, sorry for that. Why do we use the Gibbs energy for phase transition? Why is it useful? Because if you write dg, you can see that dg is v dp minus s dt. So it means that g is a function of p and t are very easy to measure in the experiment. So you can know the values of these parameters, and they are intensive parameters, as you know. And also, what is interesting with the Gibbs energy is that for an isolated system in equilibrium and at a constant P and V, so you can use this expression, and of course you see that dg is 0, so it means that the Gibbs energy is minimum in those conditions. And it means so the energy is not conserved as would be the internal energy, and this is of course because of that term here, Ts, because entropy must increase, and this is why the Gibbs energy will be minimum in equilibrium. Okay, so now if we want to study phase transition, we will take, for instance, a pure substance, and we will see if it turns into liquid, gas, a solid, or what. And possibly there will be several phases in coexisting. So we need, of course, P and T as parameters, but also we will need to know the number of molecules in each state. So in fact, using the Gibbs energy, we will need additional parameters, and these additional parameters will be, we will not choose the number of molecules, but we will choose the number of moles. This is purely arbitrary. And the number of moles, so we'll call it Ni, and I, the index, will refer either to the chemical species of the molecules or to the phase they are in. Okay, so now what it means is that instead of writing dg equal to vdp minus sdt, we will write dg equal to vdp minus sdt plus that term here. We will write it as dni, so the new variables you used, and we will introduce here mu I, and mu I, of course. Sorry, it does not work anymore. Okay. Okay. It does work. Okay, so mu I is, of course, the derivative of G with respect to the number of mole Ni at constant temperature and pressure, and this is what is called the chemical potential. So what is the chemical potential? Simply, it is defined as a variation in energy which results from a variation in the number of moles. And the chemical potential, of course, will depend on two parameters that are pressure and temperature, while the Gibbs energy we will use will depend on three parameters, the two intensive parameters P and T, and the extensive parameters corresponding to the number of moles of the different species of the system. And and you will see that, in fact, the chemical potential is a very useful quantity if you want to study phase transition. Okay, so now we can also infer. Sorry. Okay. We can also infer a very useful equation which is a Gibbs-Duhem equation. And the starting point is the fact that the energy G is extensive. Of course, if you have twice more molecules, you will have twice larger energy. So you can write it by write this condition by introducing a parameter alpha, a positive parameter alpha, and saying that the energy for Pt and alpha n, we assume that there is only one species of molecules, so this energy must be equal to alpha G because, of course, G is extensive. And sorry, there is a problem in my animation. Okay, so now what we can do is take the derivative of this equation with respect to alpha. And if we do that, the term on the left hand will be the derivative of alpha n with respect to alpha times the derivative of G with respect to n. And this must be equal simply to G because we take the derivative with respect to alpha of that term. Okay, so in the end, since we know that this derivative is equal to the chemical potential, in the end, what we get is the equation that G is equal to simply the chemical potential times N. So, of course, if we had written that condition with several species I, we would have, G equal to the sum of the chemical potential of species I times its number of moles. So you can see here that there is no more P and T. In fact, the variations with P and T are contained in the chemical potential, which itself is a function of these parameters. And clearly, you can say from this equation that, in fact, the chemical potential is very simply the molar Gibbs energy. Okay, and also there is a consequence of that relation, and this will lead to the Gibbs-Duhem equation. And the consequence is that we can differentiate. We can differentiate this equation here, and this is what we obtain. But we also know from the previous slide that dG is VdP minus SdT plus the term involving the chemical parameters. And then we have an equation relating the differentials of the chemical potential and the parameters P and T. And this is what is called the Gibbs-Duhem equation. And this equation will be very useful because it allows to write the partial derivatives of the chemical potential with respect to the pressure and the temperature. So they are respectively the molar volume and minus the molar entropy. Okay, so now we will talk about the condition for phase coexistence. We will assume that we have two phases in so this is about two phases of the same substance. And we will assume that initially the two phases are out of equilibrium, but we let them evolve from this out of equilibrium state towards equilibrium, keeping temperature and pressure constant. So if we do that, we can write that the variation of G is simply given by mu1 dn1 plus mu2 dn2, sorry. And also what we know is that the number of molecules is constant. So it gives a relation between those two quantities. And finally, we can write that dG is the difference of chemical potential between the two phases times the variation of the number of moles of in the phase 2, for instance. And we know that since the evolution goes toward equilibrium, so dg must be negative. And this tells us that if the chemical potential in the phase 2 is larger than the chemical potential in the phase 1, then the number of molecules in the phase 2 must decrease. So it means, as a general rule, that molecules go from the phase with highest chemical potential towards the phase with smallest chemical potential. Okay, and in addition, what we see is that equilibrium will correspond to equality of the chemical potential in the two phases. So this is something you must keep in mind for the following. The condition for phase coexistence at equilibrium corresponds to the equality of chemical potentials. Okay, so now knowing all what I have said, we can think about, try to figure what will be the variations of the chemical potential. And we will start from a very simple condition in which we will heat a pure substance from 0 temperature at constant pressure. So we will assume that initially the substance is a solid and we will heat it. So we know that it will undergo, at one stage, it will undergo phase transition to become a liquid, and further it will become a gas. Okay, and the question is how does the chemical potential vary with temperature? And we know two things. First, we know that the derivative of the chemical potential with temperature is minus the molar entropy. And in fact, we know three things, sorry. And we also know that the molar entropy of a solid at the solid at 0 temperature is 0. This is the third principle of thermodynamics. And also, we know that the entropy is not the same in the solid, liquid, and gas phase. In fact, it is smaller in the solid phase, and the largest molar entropy is in the gas phase. So this, of course, gives the slope of the chemical potential as a function of temperature. So now we can plot the chemical potential. So this is the horizontal tangent we have for the solid at 0 temperature. Then the chemical potential decreases, and at one point it becomes larger than the chemical potential of the liquid, which is in green here. And of course, this point corresponds to the melting temperature of the solid. And then heating further at a later point, the chemical potential of the liquid becomes larger than the chemical potential of the gas phase, and then, of course, it corresponds to the boiling temperature. So what we learn here is, what we see here is that we have a continuous variation of the chemical potential, and this is because we have equality of the chemical potential at across phase separation, a phase transition, and in contrast, the slope is discontinuous, so the derivative of the chemical potential with temperature is discontinuous at phase transition, which means that the derivative of G is discontinuous. Okay, is there any question? No? Okay, it's is it okay? Is it fluid? Okay. Okay, so to summarize what we've talked about in this first part, so what we've learned is that the chemical potential is the Gibbs energy variation, which is associated with the variation in the number of molecules of a system, and also that at equilibrium, the coexisting phases have equal chemical potentials. And okay. So now we can examine the phase diagram of a pure substance. So this is a pressure versus temperature diagram. The diagram I'm showing is for carbon dioxide. And so the colors code for the states. So you have solid here, liquid here, gas here. And we will talk about this region later. So you must keep in mind that this is a diagram for a pure substance, meaning that there is no atmosphere here, only carbon dioxide. And so you have to imagine that carbon dioxide is in a closed chamber in which the pressure and the temperature can be fixed and measured. So we have two variables, pressure and temperature, and we know that phase coexistence corresponds to equality of the chemical potentials. So it means that phase coexistence will correspond to functions of given pressure as a function of time. So in fact, they will correspond to lines in the diagram, and of course, this is the lines for coexistence of two phases. Now, if we have three phases in presence, then we will have a dot in the diagram, and you can see that there are two remarkable points. The triple point here, which corresponds to the coexistence of three phases, so the equality of the three chemical potential. And of course, here, everything is fixed. There is no degree of freedom on the values of pressure and temperature. They are given. And there is also another point here, which is of different nature. And in fact, this point ends the line of coexistence between liquid and gas. And it is called the critical point. And we will talk about this point later. So what you can see here also is that in the case of carbon dioxide, if you have a pressure of 1 atmosphere, then you can have either a solid or a gas, but not a liquid. And this, of course, means that now if you have carbon dioxide at atmospheric pressure, then you will never observe the liquid phase because, of course, the maximum pressure of the gas phase will be 1 atmosphere. So you will not be able to explore this part of the phase diagram. Of course, this is not the case for water, in which you can observe the liquid state at 1 atmosphere. Okay, so now we will examine the behavior of G across the phase boundary. And just before finishing, sorry. So what I have said is that coexistence of two phases correspond to lines in the diagram, which gives in particular the saturating vapor pressure here. This is the liquid gas coexistence. Okay, and also what I wanted to show you is that when you imagine that the pressure is constant and you heat the solid, then of course you will reach the coexistence with the liquid phase, and which will give the melting temperature of the solid. And here you will reach the coexistence of liquid and gas, and the line will give you the boiling temperature of the liquid. Okay, so now we will establish a very important equation, which is a Clapeyron equation, and we will start from the condition of coexistence at a phase boundary. So we know that mu2 is equal to mu1, so it means that we can differentiate this equation. And Okay, and also use the Gibbs-Durham equation, which gives the differential of the chemical potential. And remember, it says that the differential of mu is the molar volume times dP minus the molar entropy times dt. So we can write it for both phases, for both terms of the equation here. And we can use it to write the derivative of pressure with respect to temperature. So it will be equal to minus the difference between molar entropies divided by the difference between molar volumes. And what we know also is that the difference between entropy must be equal to the latent heat divided by the temperature. So here, L is the molar latent heat because we use molar values of the transition from 1 to 2. And finally, we obtain the Clapeyron equation, which states that the latent heat must be equal to the temperature times the difference in molar volume times the derivative of P with respect to T. So we can comment on the sign of the different terms. So what we know is that if 2 is a state of higher entropy than 1, then the latent heat must be positive. So this is a convention. When a solid turns into a liquid, then the latent heat that is associated is positive. And also, so this means that if the derivative of P with respect to T is positive, then sorry, but what did I wanted to say? It means that the molar volume of gas is larger than the molar volume of liquid, which is itself larger than the molar volume of solid. And this is the case of most substances, because for most substances, the slope here and here is positive. So the solid has the smallest molar volume. So in contrast, of course, you know that water is specific. For water, in fact, this slope here between the boundary between solid and liquid is a negative slope, which means, as you know, that the molar volume of the solid for water is larger than the molar volume of the liquid. And this is true from also some other substances. Okay, and also we can also comment the Clapeyron equation by saying that latent heat is associated with a discontinuity in both volume and entropy, which means that in fact it is associated with discontinuity of the first derivatives of the Gibbs entropy, so with pressure and temperature at phase transition. And in fact, a transition for which there is these discontinuities and existence of a latent heat is called a first-order transition. And this is the case of all of the phase transitions of a pure substance, except at the critical point. Okay, and it is also the case of other types of transition. For instance, the nematic to isotropic transition is a first-order transition. So the nematic to isotropic transition occurs in liquid crystals, which are in fact rod-like molecules that will adopt an orientational order at low temperature. Okay, so this is nematic molecules. Okay, so in contrast, you see that if there is no discontinuity of in the molar volume, then there is no latent heat, and this is what happens with other transitions, which are called second-order transitions. And for these transitions, there is a continuity of the first derivative of energy, but the higher order derivatives will be discontinuous. And examples of second-order transitions are gas-liquid transition at the critical point, but only at the critical point, and other transitions such as ferromagnetic to paramagnetic transition. Okay, is there any question? No? Okay. Okay, so now we can talk a bit about the critical point. So what is this point here that ends the coexistence line between liquid and gas, whereas you can see that the solid and liquid coexistence line has no end. Here, what happens is that above the critical point, fluid state is observed, and this fluid state is in fact an intermediate state between the gas and the liquid. In particular, it has a density which is much larger than that of a gas, but a viscosity which is much smaller than that of a liquid. And in fact, what happens at the critical point is that surface tension vanishes, so the liquid becomes the same phase as the solid. So to better understand what happened at the critical point, we can have a look at temperature versus specific volume diagram. So the specific volume is the inverse of the density. And on this diagram, we will first focus on the blue lines. The blue lines are isobaric lines for which the pressure is kept constant. So we can follow an isobaric line and we will know what happens when for instance, when we increase temperature at constant pressure. So we will use this first line here that starts here. So first you have a liquid. In fact, the liquid state is here. You have a liquid and then you heat it at constant pressure. Then its specific volume slightly increases. And at this point here, it starts to boil. And so it means that gas appears. And as long as there is a coexistence between liquid and gas, then there is a plateau in temperature. And the last point here of the plateau corresponds to the disappearance of the liquid phase. So all the substance is now a gas. And then if you keep heating the gas, of course, its specific volume will increase. Okay. But you can see that if you do now the same experiment, but at a larger pressure, so this is the line here, the blue line here, what happens is that the specific volume corresponding to the beginning and the end of the plateau, of the temperature plateau, they are closer from one another. And this is true as long as you keep increasing the pressure. And sorry. Okay. So the specific volume, the difference of specific volume between gas and liquid decreases continuously, and at one point, which is a critical point, this difference is zero. Okay, so the isobaric line here is the line obtained at the critical pressure, which has a very definite value. So all the values here are given for water. Okay, and you can see also that this critical point, it is a very specific point because it is point of horizontal tangent, which means that the derivative of temperature with respect to specific volume is 0 at this point, but it is also an inflection point. So it means that the second derivative of temperature with volume is also 0, and in fact, you could show that all the derivatives of temperature with respect to specific volume are 0 at the critical point. And this has, of course, consequences because the physical properties of the substance at the critical point will be either 0 or will be singular. And this is the case, for instance, of the heat capacity of propane or any substance. And so the heat capacity is related to the second derivative of the Gibbs entropy with respect to temperature. And you can see that it is, so this is the critical point, the critical temperature of propane. This capacity is singular at the critical point. So now we can have a look at the different values of temperature and pressure at the critical point for different substances. And you can see that they are very different, both for temperature and pressure. But what we can do is plot, here, this is what has been done, plot instead of plotting the temperature, we can plot the normalized temperature by the value at the critical point and plot it as a normalized density, so normalized by its value at the critical point. And you can see that for all the substances that are here, in fact, all the data collapse onto a master curve. And this, be careful because here we've got the gas phase, so this is low density, the gas phase on the left, in contrast to the diagram I have shown you before, where it was shown as a function of the specific volume, sorry. Here it is shown as the density, so the gas phase is on the left and the liquid phase is on the right. And so there is a universal behavior for all substances given by that master curve, and that master curve has the expression that is given here, and you can see that there is a term which has power 1 as a function of 1 minus t over tc, and also there is a term here with an exponent which is a fraction, and which explain, of course, the singularities of the higher of the derivatives of higher order than 1. And the exponent here is called the critical exponent. So not only is the behavior universal for all systems if the data is normalized with respect to the values at the critical point, but also it is described by an exponent, by a variation with a power law with a given exponent. Okay, so to summarize what we've seen in this part, we have said that phase transitions of pure substances are first-order transitions, which are characterized by a latent heat, which is given by the Clapeyron equation and is related to the discontinuity in specific or molar volume. And this is true for all phase transitions of a pure substance, except the critical liquid gas point. And also, we have seen that close to the critical point, there is a continuous variation of the specific volume. And so the first derivative of the Gibbs energy is continuous, but in contrast, the higher order derivatives are discontinuous, and this is the feature of what is called second order transition. Okay, so now we can go to the third part of this lecture, in which I will briefly give the principle of the Landau theory. So Landau theory is a very general theory of phase transition, and it is based on the idea that the phase transition will correspond to a change in the value of a parameter, which we will denote M, and this parameter is called the order parameter. And this parameter, for instance, it changes at the transition, for instance, with temperature, but it could be another variable, but we will choose temperature. So what happens is that when the temperature is smaller than a critical temperature, then the order parameter is different from 0, whereas at higher temperature, M is 0. So it is called the order parameter because, of course, it is an order-disorder transition. We've got disorder at large temperature and order at small temperature. And it is very general because it can describe phase transitions such as, for instance, the ferromagnetic to paramagnetic transition. And just to give an example of the order parameter, then for that transition, the order parameter would be the magnetization. Okay, so sorry. Okay, is there any question? No. Okay, you're still here. Okay, so the assumption of Landau theory is that energy can be written as a function of that order parameter M and temperature, and that function is called the Landau functional, and this and energy is determined by the minimization of this function with respect to the order parameter. And the energy will be written as an expansion as a series of powers of the order parameter. This is what I have written here. So G is given by G naught, which is a function of temperature, and the expansion here in powers of M with coefficients that depend on temperature. And the assumption of Landau is that all the coefficients here vary smoothly with temperature, except one that will, in fact, contain the temperature dependence at the transition. And this term will be the lowest order term. So let's take an example. For instance, for a second order transition that we will examine, it can be shown that the Gibbs energy will only contain even orders, even powers of M. So we will keep only the three first terms of the expansion, and the important variation with temperature at phase transition are contained in the first non-zero term, which is the term here with of the power 2, and is written as a term here B times T minus Tc, which means that this term, the term of the power 2, changes sign, its sign changes at the phase transition. And we will assume that B and D are positive. So knowing all these assumptions, what we can do now is, sorry, is writing the condition form for equilibrium to determine the energy, and we know that the energy must be minimum with respect to the order parameter, so at constant temperature. So simply, we will take the derivative of G with respect to M, and we obtain this equation here. And you can see that they are the roots of this equation are different if T is larger or smaller than Tc. If T is larger than Tc, then the only root is 0 for the order parameter. And in contrast, if T is smaller than Tc, then there are two roots, because Tc minus T is a positive quantity, and two roots of different sign. So what does it mean? Now we can, knowing these roots, we can plot the Gibbs energy, sorry, the Gibbs energy as a function of the order parameter, and this is the plot we have here. So the line here at the bottom is a line for a temperature which is smaller than the critical temperature. And you can see that the Gibbs energy has two minimum according to the order parameter, two minimum and one maximum. And then, okay, and then as temperature increases closer to the critical temperature, then the positions of the minimum evolve. They become smaller, they both tend towards 0. And then at the critical temperature, there is only one minimum left, which corresponds to 0 order parameter. And above the critical temperature, there is still that minimum here. So you can see that the value of the order parameter at minimum evolves continuously from finite values toward 0 at the critical temperature and above the critical temperature. Oui? Sorry, what I do simply is that I plot the lines corresponding to constant temperature of G as a function. It is this function simply. So this the x-axis is the order parameter. Okay, so this is simply this function here at a given temperature and as a function of m. So we are searching for the minimums of G. Okay, so I plot. En fait, this is the same as doing that, but in a plot. Okay, I plot the curve and I observe that there are two minimums for G at temperature smaller than the critical temperature, and it corresponds to these two roots here. Whereas at temperature larger than the critical temperature, there is only one minimum, and it corresponds to this root here. Any other question? No? Yes? Okay, because I was going too fast, I think. In fact, okay, so Landau theory describe an order to disorder transition. And in general, when there is an order to disorder transition, there is a change in the symmetry of the result, meaning that you have at large temperature, we have no symmetry, whereas at smaller temperature, you have symmetries. And in fact, Landau theory accounts for the change. Do you hear me? Okay. Accounts for the change in symmetries, and the change in symmetry will give constraints on these parameters here. And in fact, you can show that generally for second order transition, because of the change in symmetries, you will have zero term of first order of power 1 in M, and you will keep only the even terms. But it depends. In fact, it is specific to the symmetries you have, and this is something you must know. And okay, so I try to be general, but in fact, what you do is that when you use Landau theory, you have to consider a specific phase transition and to think about the change in symmetry, and what will tell you what terms be zero or non-zero. Did it answer your question? Yes? Okay. Sorry, I have been too fast on that point. Okay. So going back to this G variation with the order parameter, so it means now, okay, that we can plot variations of the order parameter as a function of temperature. So we know it is 0 for temperatures larger than Tc, and we know it is given by so the expression here. So there are two roots, a positive one and a negative one, for temperatures smaller than the critical one. And you can see that the order parameter varies with the difference between temperature and critical temperature to the power 1/2 here. So not only is there a continuous variation of the order parameter towards the critical point, but also there is a critical exponent. And this is absolutely analogous to what we have said about the critical gas-liquid point. So this was the variations of the normalized temperature as a function of the normalized density. Now, if instead of plotting that as a function of the normalized density, you choose to plot it as a function of the normalized density minus 1, which is in fact the value at the critical point. So you will simply shift that curve toward the left, and this will be the y-axis will be here. And then if you turn that curve in order to have the temperature at the x-axis and the normalized density -1 as the vertical axis, you will have that kind of curve. Okay, so in fact, for the critical gas-liquid point, the order parameter would be the normalized density -1. Okay, now we can also examine a variation of other quantities, because we said that some physical properties can be singular at the critical point. And since we know the roots and we know the Gibbs energy, we can take the derivative of the Gibbs energy with respect to temperature, the second derivative, And so we can compute the heat capacity at constant pressure. And what we obtain from the equations, from the equations we have written here, what we obtain is that, for temperature larger than the critical temperature, then the heat capacity will be a constant because G naught depends on temperature. Okay, and in contrast, for temperature smaller than the critical temperature, then it will be given by C naught plus a term that depends on temperature. And so it is a linear variation of the heat capacity with temperature. So I plot here the heat capacity as a function of temperature. And it means that the heat capacity increases up to the critical point. But then at the critical point, it becomes again equal to C naught. So there is a discontinuity at the critical point of the heat capacity as expected for a second order transition. Okay, so you can see now if we think about the critical point at gas-liquid transition, of course, remember the critical exponent was not 1/2, it was 1/3. So it means that with the Landau theory, we only qualitatively capture the features of the transition as the critical point. But in fact, Landau theory can be quantitative, and this is the case, for instance, for ferroelectricity and for supraconductivity, meaning that then the critical exponent will be quantitatively predicted by Landau theory, as well as the variations, for instance, of heat capacity. Is there any question? Sorry, I'm not sure to have what I haven't. Your question is, do all these terms here have a meaning? Well, I don't know how to answer this question. Does somebody have any idea about that in the room? Okay, thank you. Okay, and just, and in fact, that will be the end of my first lecture. in fact, Landau theory can also account, so also in a very general way, it can also account for the features of first order transition. And in that case, what you need is to use the same expansion, but with a term of power, a non-zero term of power 3. Okay? And then you can do the same, meaning that you are looking for the minimum of the Gibbs energy. And if you plot the Gibbs energy as a function of the order parameter at constant temperature, so you will obtain these curves here. So the first curve at the bottom here corresponds to a temperature which is smaller than the critical temperature. And you can see that you have, so here this is 0 for the order parameter. There is a problem with my graph. So at T smaller than Tc, then the minimum corresponds to a non-zero value of the order parameter. And as you increase the temperature, you see that the value will change. But at one point here, which corresponds to a critical temperature, I will come back later to its value, you can see that the minimum has a zero value, which is, this is a zero line for G minus G naught. And there is also another minimum here, which means that when you keep increasing the temperature, and then, sorry, this minimum here, this point here goes up further, then the true minimum will correspond to a zero order parameter. So you see that you have a discontinuous behavior because above this temperature here, the true minimum becomes corresponds to an order parameter which is zero. So the order parameter goes from a finite value toward zero in a discontinuous way. And this is simply obtained by introducing this term here with a power 3. Yes, sorry. And the only difference here is that this happens not at the critical temperature, which is here, but at a temperature T naught, which depends on the coefficients you have introduced in the expansion here. So doing that, you find the discontinuous behavior of the order parameter with temperature. It decreases and then is discontinuous at T naught. And also you can show that it is associated with a non-zero variation of entropy at T naught, which means that in that case there is a latent heat. Okay, so because the first derivative of G with respect to T is not is discontinuous in that case. Okay, and just to give a concrete example, in fact, this type of behavior is the type of behavior that is found, for instance, in the nematic to isotropic transition I talked about at the beginning. Is there any question? Uh-huh. Okay, it is also linked to in fact to the nematic to isotropic transition. Okay, because in that case, you can show that the first order term is zero, but not the third order term. Okay. Is there any question? Okay, so you see that what you must keep in mind is that, in fact, if you want to justify the expressions for the Gibbs energy, then you have to use the change of symmetries of the system, which I have not done because I wanted to give a general view of the Landau theory, but you can also see it as a mathematical model that allows to find the features of the transitions of the first order and second order transitions. And okay, that's it. Okay, so this is a summary of my first lecture. So the different points we've seen before, and for Landau theory, what we've shown is that talking about the critical point, we have see that the specific volumes varies continuously at the critical point, and which is a feature of second order transition, but higher order derivatives are discontinuous. And Landau theory so uses the expansion of a functional, and this functional is written as a function of an order parameter, and this allows description of the features of first and second order transitions. And yes, what I wanted to say is that whereas it can be quantitative for second order transitions, in fact, it is qualitative only for first order transition. Okay, and this is where I will end my lecture. And of course, I will try to answer any question. Yes. Sorry, I don't hear you very well. Could someone closer to the computer? Yes, yes. Uh-huh. Uh, okay, so maybe what I can do is give you a proper answer at the beginning of my second lecture, because then I will make a slide and it will be easier to answer you. Is it okay? Okay. Thanks to you. See you. Will it be at 9 tomorrow? Will my second lecture will be at 9 tomorrow? Okay. So see you at 9. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Okay, bye.